Hi, my name is Philip Abraham. I am a consultant gastroenterologist at the PD Hinduja Hospital and Hinduja Healthcare in Mumbai. I have been practicing gastroenterology now for close to 40 years, and I have special interest in the field of acid peptic disorders and functional bowel disorders. In our clinical practice, I would think about 30 to 40% of patients have symptoms related either with other morbidities or on their own related to acid peptic disorders. And we know that the current pandemic and the lockdown have adversely affected the well being of the entire population. Part of this, of course, is due to the stress and anxiety that has happened with the lockdown and its effect on acid secretion as well as on mucosal defense. We know that mucosal defense is so dependent on prostaglandin secretion, as well as to a small extent, although we don't recognize that commonly, on adrenergic stimulation. So these things get adversely affected during stress periods. Mucosal defense, although we think of that as a biochemical situation, mucosal defense actually goes down during anxiety and stress situations. So for one thing, the stress and anxiety and its effect on acid secretion and mucosal defense. Additionally, we have the unique complications that have come up with home confinement. Because of home confinement and the lack of activity and the erratic meal timings, because when you're in hospital or in the office, you have fixed meal timings. Being at home, it's so flexible and easy availability, of course. This should be considered a negative point. Easy availability of homemade snacks and fast foods. So inactivity, irregular meal timings, and easy access to fast foods made at home, homemade snacks, and of course, the flip side of it is also difficult access to medical care. So we have stress and anxiety affecting acid secretion and mucosal defense. And on the other hand, we have the problems with home confinement and difficult access to medical care. Particularly in the elderly and those with comorbidities like diabetes, it makes the situation even worse. So we need to take measures to take control of this situation and optimize acid management or acidity management. So when it comes to management of GERD, even in common clinical practice, the first step, of course, is lifestyle modifications, which all of us know about. When these fail, if a person needs to use a liquid antacid, for example, once a day or maybe even once a week, that's fine with us. This is what we call on-demand management. But when the need for antacid therapy or the need for continuous medication comes in, we have to move on to the next step. So when these steps fail, we go on to specific drug treatment for GERD. The drugs that we use for GERD include the histamine H2 receptor antagonists, proton pump inhibitors, and prokinetics. I'm just giving you a summary of the drugs that we use. But all current guidelines recommend that the first line treatment should be proton pump inhibitors. The reason is while H2RA are excellent drugs for acid control, they don't give the kind of 24-hour control or even 18-hour control that you need for healing GERD. So the treatment for GERD is one step stronger than the treatment for the standard acid peptic disorders. So the first step in medical management when a doctor comes in is the use of proton pump inhibitors. And both the American College of Gastroenterology, the American Gastroenterology Association, as well as now the World Gastroenterology Organization have all recommended that the first step in the management of GERD when lifestyle management and on-demand therapy fails is the use of PPI. So we have to remember that the manifestations of GERD can be typical or atypical. The atypical ones are the ones that are either esophageal manifestations or supraesophageal manifestations or extraesophageal manifestations. For the typical symptoms, these organizations recommend an 8-week trial with a PPI. Now remember that this should be done only in the absence of alarm features. If a patient has any alarm features like a recent onset, accompanying weight loss or dysphagia or anemia or some evidence of GI bleed, now the standard proton pump inhibitors have to be administered about 30 to 60 minutes prior to a meal if we have to get optimal pH control. That's because of the activation cycle of the PPI. The second generation PPI, that means predominantly rabeprazole and esomeprazole, as far as India is concerned, the second generation PPI are slightly different from the first generation ones in that recent data show that you could administer these drugs irrespective of the timing of meal. So there's less emphasis on administering the drugs in relation to meal. For example, rabiprazole. You can give it before a meal, during a meal, after a meal. If you forget to take it before a meal, it achieves optimal suppression, acid suppression, irrespective of the time. And also, the advantage of rabiprazole is that you can get optimal acid suppression from the first administration. From day one onward, you notice a rise in pH and a drop in acid secretion. And because of its high pKa, it can get activated at higher pH levels. In one study, in fact, they had shown over 200 patients that the first 24-hour heartburn-free interval was significantly shorter. That means the time to achieve that was significantly earlier on rabiprazole, and within 4 weeks, you had complete heartburn relief achieved, along with improvement in regurgitation, belching, and early satiety. So that's the advantage of rabiprazole, one of the later or second generation molecules of PPI. So the first line treatment, a drug like rabiprazole, given irrespective or with less emphasis on the timing with meal, achieves relief within the first day itself. The time to complete relief is also within 4 weeks. You have complete relief of all symptoms of GERD. So this is the first line treatment for GERD. Now, if you look at the pathophysiology of GERD, there are many components to it, and most of us know all about that. But one component that we need to pay attention to is gastric emptying. When a person has slow gastric emptying, that contributes to reflux disease. And how do you recognize this clinically? These are patients who will also say that in addition to their heartburn and regurgitation, they also have fullness in the epigastric. A small meal, they start feeling full. They have a full meal, and then the fullness remains for hours after that. So clinically, you suspect that these patients have delayed gastric emptying. When this is a component of GERD, it's actually a component of what we call functional dyspepsia, with reflux being a part of that. But when patients with GERD have delayed gastric emptying, the addition of a prokinetic is important. For example, one drug that's available everywhere is domperidone. This is a prokinetic that acts on the endogenous dopamine. It's actually a dopamine D2 antagonist. But in India, we have the combination of rabiprazole and domperidone. Domperidone is in fact recommended by the European Medicines Agency to relieve nausea and vomiting, and also for initial control of the dyspeptic symptoms associated with GERD. So I have been using the combination of rabiprazole and domperidone in such a situation. I begin by giving this combination initially, and when the patient is relieved of his symptoms, I start tapering down the medication. That means I first take off the domperidone if there is no more component of delayed gastric emptying, and I continue with the rabiprazole with progressively reducing medications. So I prefer, like I said, to start with a combination and bring down the combination to single drug use the moment the patient has relief of symptoms, which may be a few days or even a few weeks from initiation of therapy. One thing we must remember with the use of PPI is never to discontinue the drug abruptly, because this drug keeps acid secretion under control. If you remove it abruptly, acid secretion may rebound and the patient may come back with even more symptoms he had earlier. So the principle holds. Use a combination if you need it. Take off the combination and come back to rabiprazole, 40 milligrams, 20 milligrams as required, and bring it down to 10 milligrams before you can take off the drug. That's the management line that I follow with GERD.
Hello, I'm Dr. Seema Jaiswal from Gwalior MP. I would like to know the latest guidelines for the GERD diagnosis.
Now, it doesn't need guidelines to tell us how to diagnose GERD, but I'll take these step by step. First, let's look at the symptoms. The cardinal symptoms of GERD are heartburn and regurgitation. Heartburn itself has a sensitivity of about 70%, specificity approximately the same, and regurgitation also has that. So if you have either of these symptoms, you are 70% confident that this is due to GERD. When you combine these, that means when patients come with a combination of these symptoms, you are 90% certain that this is indeed GERD. Now, what is the balance 10% that we're leaving out of the sensitivity and specificity? That means patients who have heartburn can be suffering from other conditions as well. So we have functional heartburn, we have reflux hypersensitivity, But very important for us to remember in clinical practice is that esophageal motility disorders also can present with heartburn. Achalasia, for example, or esophagogastric junction obstruction can present with heartburn. Regurgitation also can be a manifestation of esophageal motility disorders. So, presence of heartburn and regurgitation for practical purposes is good, but remember that you may have to rule out conditions like EMD, that is esophageal motility disorders, or even a sensitive esophagus or reflux hypersensitivity. So that's for the clinical diagnosis of GERD. So when you have to go beyond clinical management and you're looking at higher levels of treatment or for research purposes, you have to then objectively document GERD. When it comes to objectively documenting GERD, or when it comes to stepping up the management for GERD, we need to have a definitive diagnosis of GERD. In addition to the clinical symptoms, you then need an objective investigation. And the investigation of choice, or the gold standard for investigation, is what we call ambulatory pH monitoring, which could be for 24 hours or 48 hours. There we place a pH electrode into the esophagus above the GE junction and record the pH over 24 hours. There are certain components that we analyze when we're looking for GERD during the pH recording. Among them, the number of reflux episodes occurring during 24 hours, the number of episodes that last more than 5 minutes, the total duration of pH less than 4 during those 24 hours. Putting them all together, there's a composite score called the Demister score. Now, the Demister score puts these together and gives us a value. Any value above 22 suggests that this patient has significant GERD.
Secondly, I would also like to know the management of GERD-induced irritative cough.
Now, this is important. This opens a new avenue for us. Earlier, we talked about the typical and the atypical symptoms of GERD. The atypical symptoms are the ones who present, for example, with chest pain. They don't have burning, they don't have regurgitation, they just talk about chest pain, and that pain very closely mimics cardiac pain. So we call it non-cardiac chest pain, NCCP. And remember that NCCP can also occur not only in GERD, but also in esophageal motility disorders. Achalasia, for example, or what we call the jackhammer esophagus, can present with chest pain. Okay, so those are atypical esophageal manifestations. We have extraesophageal or supraesophageal manifestations, and one of them is throat irritation, repeated throat infections, irritative cough, particularly in neonates and in children. They have aspiration pneumonia. So supraesophageal symptoms of gastroesophageal reflux disease, and one of them is cough. Now, why is that important? Number one is to be able to catch the diagnosis. The principle that we need to know is that the management of supra or extraesophageal GERD disease needs higher doses of PPI with or without combination with a prokinetic. So while standard GERD can be managed with a single dose of a PPI, rabiprazole 20 milligrams in the morning, is generally adequate to control GERD. But when a person has irritative cough, a supraesophageal manifestation, he may need 20 milligram twice a day. Or if his symptoms are in the night, we may even shift the PPI to the night, or we may add on a nightcap, which we'll come to later. So patients with supraesophageal manifestations generally need higher doses than those with straightforward GERD. So if we had to put that in perspective, those with standard acid peptic diseases need the lowest doses. Those with GERD need a higher dose, and those with supraesophageal manifestations of GERD need even higher dose. So you may have to either split the dosing or more commonly double the dosing in those who have cough as a manifestation of GERD.
Hello, sir. I am Dr. Sanjay from Dibrugarh, Assam. One of my 37-year-old male patient with no significant past history reported with progressive heartburn since past 6 months. He has taken some home remedies and even the OTC drugs, but with no significant relief. Although he got good symptomatic relief in last 2 months with prescription of pantoprazole, nocturnal heartburn symptoms are still persistent. Please guide me about how to manage this case. Thank you.
Now, there's an entity called nocturnal acid breakthrough, which was described more than 20 years ago. But at that time, it was a finding on 24-hour pH recording. We realized that even with a morning dose of a PPI, somewhere in the middle of the night towards 2 o'clock, the pH starts dropping again, the acid level goes up again. Initially, we didn't have a correlate clinically. We didn't know what was the importance of this pH finding, so we neglected it. Till more and more patients came to us with persistent nighttime symptoms. Excellent control during the day, but nighttime symptoms as well. And then we realized that this nocturnal acid breakthrough also needs attention. So logically, the way to treat that would be either to shift the PPI to the evening, but then the daytime becomes a problem. To split the dose into two, which would give relief, no doubt. To double the dose of PPI morning and evening, so rabeprazole 20 morning, 20 evening. But strangely, none of this has given the same response as adding what we call a nightcap. That means we give a PPI in the morning in the conventional dose, rabeprazole 20 milligrams in the morning, and before dinner, we give him an histamine H2 receptor antagonist, like ranitidine 150 milligrams. So you add on a nightcap to get excellent nighttime symptom relief. So if I have to put it all together, we realize that, just to summarize once again, regular acid peptic diseases, single dose PPI, maybe even an H2RA. Reflux disease, you need to top it up. You need to go to a higher dose or even double the dose. Those who have supraesophageal symptoms, yes, you may need double dose even regularly. Or those who have extraesophageal symptoms like irritative cough. And those who have nocturnal acid breakthrough, you need to give the conventional PPI in the morning and need to add in H2RA as the nightcap to give optimal 24-hour control. So that summarizes our management options for GERD.